You are miserable because you're not really sure what to do with jealousy, and it probably triggers your sense of shame. It's not that jealousy is an emotion that you are not supposed to have, or envy, you're not supposed to feel it toward others. It's that you're supposed to find a way to use it as a means of steering you in the direction of where you want to go. So if you see somebody and perhaps they have a certain accolade or certification, or they have a certain accomplishment under their belt that you don't have, or perhaps they look a certain way or are able to embody a certain essence or project a certain air about them that perhaps you want to, yeah, like it's going to trigger off a sense of inadequacy, and it likely could make you feel envious of that person. But instead of hyper focusing, because a lot of times people are socialized to use their envy as a springboard into comparison based assessments of other people, or trying to put them into categorizations that would make the person who is experiencing the envy feel better. So it's more of like a self placating thing. So, for example, maybe somebody sees somebody else that has a really stylish air about them. They're very fashionable, they're very well dressed, they're very well put together. People compliment them on the way they look. Perhaps they have a very unique look. And this makes the other person that is observing this feel envious because people don't give them that kind of attention. And maybe that goes back to the fact that maybe when they were younger they didn't receive as much attention from their peers as, say, like maybe a sibling or a friend, or what have you. And so now it's going even deeper than that. Now this person's having like this automatic visceral response, and it could be inward and internal, where it's not even something that is explosive and seen from the outside as like, oh damn, like that person's jealous. Sometimes it just comes across, it might come across as passive aggression if the two people are communicating, but sometimes it comes across as just like this person just deciding that anything that the person they're envious of does is just wrong. It's not good enough. I have to pick it apart. And it might even start as a subconscious process. And I think that's where things get a little bit dangerous, because it's like, okay, you have the capability to make note of what it is that this person has that you don't. And you also have the capability of asking questions. So you could put those two things together, and you could ask this person about how they were able to attain this thing that you are also looking to obtain. But again, we don't live in a perfect world, and that's uncomfortable and would require tools in your toolkit that perhaps you don't have yet, or you're still working on. And so maybe your knee-jerk reaction is still to do the whole comparison. Well, she has a prettier face, but my ass is fatter, or some whatever, right? Like, you might have a better job than me, but I'm partnered and you're single, assuming that that's somehow a dig, even though most times it's not. And so a lot of times people are socialized and subconsciously positively reinforce behaviors that we know are problematic, but in the moment, especially when you're looking to run from shame. I know last time I spoke about the relationship that people have with shame, and how it can turn them from a people pleaser, which seems very innocent on the surface, to like a hardened, seasoned hater, pick me veteran, right? Like, and that's how you end up with judgmental aunties and mothers and bosses and coworkers who just are very miserable, and you could just tell that they hate their lives and they make it everyone else's problem. And that personality type, they will oftentimes also have this very competitive mindset where everything is based on rank. They look at everything through a very rank based, very hierarchical lens. And so because of this, they are looking to, at the very least, signal to themselves subconsciously, inwardly, that they are at very least on the same rank with you, or that they are slightly above you, even if they know it's not true. And what could drive a person to act that irrational really is the wound, the trigger of feeling inadequate. Now, we can't possibly know moment to moment what other people's triggers are, but we know that when we are in situations where we feel envy, we know what our triggers are. And so learning how to check yourself and put that aside, the same way that I'm being real and talking to you right now, I talk to myself like this in the mirror. And so being able to look at yourself and have a conversation, whether it's in a journal, whether it's in the mirror, sometimes I don't like to physically journal, and I will instead just speak to myself in the mirror. Or I'll record a voice note like this and I'll listen to it later. And so being able to check yourself and process and go through your traumas, your triggers, your problems, the things that stress you, the things that you wish could be better, being honest about that, some people call it radical acceptance, that puts you at an advantage, because now when you're in a position where you do have an opportunity to level up, you have an opportunity to gain a new skill, you are in a room with somebody or in a space with somebody that has something that you don't have. So when you do feel that pang of envy, which many people will feel, you can actually take it and turn it into something useful, something that's going to serve you. Now you can use it as fuel to assess, okay, how do I want to package the way I want to ask about this person? What do I want to ask them about? What do I want to look into? Maybe you don't ask them anything and you just take note of a couple things and you go home and you look it up on your own. Whatever it is that you're doing, you're using that envy you initially felt, you're using that little trigger of, oh, I don't have this, to explore what it is that you want and what you could have, because that's really what envy is. It is a driver, it is a navigational device for getting closer to that which you desire. But when you are conditioned to be a rank-based thinker, when you're conditioned to, be a conformist and live your life based on what other people want for you and not living out of a sense of sovereignty and a sense of authenticity, a lot of times what can happen is you become a slave to jealousy and envy and feeling inadequate. And that's how you end up with a personality type that is very, cliquey, very opportunistic, very miserable, always comparing themselves to others, always comparing others to other people and triangulating different people against each other. This is how you end up with that very messy, kind of envious kind of personality. You know what I mean? That in my family, said, we say that they kind of send mal de ojo or al ain, depending on which side of my family you're talking to, right? And so like that evil eye, that kind of, that bad mind, right? That is how you end up with that. These people they weren't just born like this. They never learned how to process envy and jealousy. They never learned what to do with it. They never learned how to regulate themselves. They get dysregulated as soon as the source of whatever their envy is, whether it's a person or, whether it's a group of people, whatever it is, it dysregulates them so much and it throws them so much out of bounds. Some people do crazy things. Look at the singer, Selena Quintanilla, may she rest in peace, right? That lady murked her ultimately out of envy. So it can really get that serious. Some people, the Diddy documentary came out, and people are starting to resurface conversations regarding what could have allegedly happened to Tupac and Biggie out of sheer envy. And so it can go that far. And so when you don't know how to metabolize and, dare I say, alchemize envy and use it for your own advancement and growth, and use it as a means to steer you and drive you towards that which you desire. Because if somebody else has it, clearly you can also have it. But you having it, the only way, some people, the other trap is, the only way I can have this thing is if I take it from you or if I take it from that person. That scarcity mindset. There's quite literally enough for everyone. Adopting a scarcity mindset is not really healthy, and as much as it can sound, very hippy dippy and out there to some people, that abundance, adopting in a mindset of abundance and knowing that there is enough out there, right, can be a little awkward at first, especially if you come from a family dynamic or a social dynamic where being more pessimistic is seen as being more rational, or being cynical is seen as being sensible and adult-like, and being optimistic and hopeful and positive can be, and having an abundance mindset as opposed to scarcity can be seen as childish. But you have to learn how to take envy, take shame, because at the root of envy really is shame. So going back to the previous conversation we had, learning how to metabolize that and take the useful bits out of it, distill your envy and take the useful bits out of it, and then process and discard the rest. What is it about this person that makes you feel as though I don't feel adequate? What get to the root of that? What is the feeling that you're looking to have once you get whatever this trait or thing is that this other person has that you don't have? Once you get to the root of that, you'll be unstoppable.